Recently, I've got into blockchain over the last year. I'm not an expert. I need to read the book on blockchain for dummies. I know something about blockchain. So today's panel, we're not going to be talking too much about either the ICOs or how to get rich quick and how to earn millions rich. So I'm sorry to disappoint that. No tips on which crypto to buy or not to buy. What we are going to focus on is looking at the social benefits, or what is the potential of blockchain and how it could potentially affect how we live as a society and what is coming up in the future. So with that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to set the first question, and then I will ask each panelist to also introduce themselves, their play with blockchain, their interaction with blockchain, and then also dive into the question. So the question is, how do you see blockchain benefiting society as a whole in terms of inclusion and empowering the masses? And Nigel, if you can start with that, please.
Hi, good evening. Nigel Romano, CEO of the GMMB Bank. First, why I'm very much interested in blockchain, because I believe GMMB and the GMMB group is very much interested in financial inclusion, in bringing the mass of the population that is currently outside of the system into the system. And the blockchain is the internet of the 21st century. We now have the internet of information. For me, in a nutshell, the blockchain is the internet of value. And it has the potential to cut out the middleman, the rentiers, the intermediaries, including the banks. Because the immediate middleman you look at when you see the blockchain, when you talk about Bitcoin, is the banks and the financial services industry. But we are not the only intermediaries that are facing extinction. We also have the accountants, the lawyers, the auditors, you name it, and the blockchain has the potential to speed up transactions, to reduce the amount of friction in those transactions, and to make those transactions much cheaper. So for me, the blockchain has been referred to, and it was referred to by its founder, Satoshi Nakamoto, as the Bitcoin protocol. For me, the blockchain is the trust protocol, because it allows us to transact without having to think about whether or not the person we are dealing with is really the person we are dealing with. It allows us to not have to think about whether that person has the capacity to complete whatever transaction we are dealing with. And it therefore makes the unbanked and the underbanked so much more able to participate. It's not going to be easy. It's not going to happen overnight, but it has the potential to facilitate commerce, and by facilitating and speeding up commerce, increase GDP by magnitudes of percentages. So that's why I'm interested in the blockchain.
Same question to Peter.
Okay. My name is Peter George. I straddle both the legacy world and the digital world. Hopefully, most of you in here would have eaten some sort of product that we create, whether in your restaurants or in Linda's Bakery. I'm also chairman of BIT, which is an internet blockchain startup in Barbados that we started in 2014. I'm also chairman of Peer Bank, which is a digital bank. Novelty Curve, which is an internet VC arm that focuses on blockchain businesses, not as much from an investment standpoint, but from the standpoint of providing the assistance to those companies. So I would be what you call an early adopter. I think in the days of when people, it was either you were a believer or a lunatic. Now you can categorize blockchain either investors into, like I said, speculators, investors, or believers. It is transformational in very, very much the same way the World Wide Web was. The very nature of blockchain is that it's a trustless system. Now, when I try to explain trustless system to some people, they say, but I don't understand. It's trustless means it has no trust. No, the trust becomes decentralized. And in societies like ours, and I'm not saying particularly just Trinidad alone, but societies today that are hopelessly riddled with corruption and inequity, from business official to government official to regional officials throughout the world, what a trustless system does is that you do not have to put your faith in an individual, right, that is susceptible to various different things. It's not centrally controlled. You have this group of supercomputers blocked together on a chain, thus called the blockchain, independently verifying transactions, independently verifying contracts, independently verifying agreements, and so on and so forth. And that's where the essence of the blockchain came from. So you have this entity that can now begin to decentralize all of the requirements, and as Nigel pointed out, there will no longer be a need for a middleman in many regards. It's not just in the banking sector, but when it comes to smart contracts, that all of these computers can verify whether it's a marriage registry, whether it's a conveyance contract, or whatever is required, that begins to remove all of these excess costs via this trustless system. You don't need to have a JP that stamps this. You don't have to have this go down to the lawyers. You don't have to have, all of those things can be removed. We presented actually at MIT BIT in 2016. And it was remarkable. MIT had already engaged in a study about the Caribbean. And they said, shipping costs into the English-speaking Caribbean. So that means us. We've taken out Puerto Rico. We've taken out Cuba. Taken out Dominican Republic. Our boys from I guess, Jamaica, Antigua, and down to us. 700 remittance costs, and this is shipping into the Caribbean. $700 million. Demurrage, storage, LC fees, overnight insurance, all of those things. And they said the blockchain can reduce that by 70%, right? So you're talking about, and that's shipping into, this is not out, this is just shipping into the Caribbean. So if you just take that figure and you times it by 2, you're talking about 1.4 billion US a year throughout the Caribbean. That could be saved, you're talking about saving 980 million, close to $1 billion. And what can happen with that money? Well, if that money is saved, where else it can go within the economy? So these are some of the things that the blockchain can do. Layers and layers of these costs being shaved off. That's the power of the blockchain. That's the real world-changing stuff of the blockchain. I guess we're going to have some more questions, Ajmal, I assume. So I'm going to leave it at that. That's really what it does with the trustless system that really begins to level the playing field.
Right, thanks for that. That was a good introduction to the decentralization, or having a trustless system where you do have trust, but it's decentralized. And same question, Randall?
Yeah, thanks, Ash, and thanks for having me here. Some of you may, I'm in technology. I'm not a technologist. I've worked in finance. I'm currently a manager at EY in risk assurance. I have a strong interest in blockchain. I started looking at it almost a year to 2 years ago. Now, I think I agree with Peter and Nigel that blockchain certainly has the potential to change a lot of what of how things are done right now across industries. I think right now what we're seeing is the financial services sector in advanced countries are some of the first adopters to take blockchain and move it out of the cryptocurrency space into smaller proof of concepts, Ripple Some of them have piggybacked on existing blockchain cryptocurrencies, Ripple being one of them. But that's where I see, at least right now, those proof of concepts outside of the cryptocurrency space happening. Bitcoin was the proof of concept for blockchain. I think it is right now. It is it can't be seen as, or right now it's seen as one. A lot of people see it as one and both the same. Then, but that is slowly being disintermediated, delinked. Then, as people take the technology now that it has been proven and start to apply it to different sectors. On the topic of decentralization and inclusion. I mean, I see blockchain, for example, helping to improve voting. Let's just say government set up large public registers, blockchain-backed registers of identity, storing all of your information, your address, date of birth, etc. Imagine you go to the bank, you don't have to bring all your utility bill to prove your address, who you are. The bank is on the system, the government-held system, and just pulls that up and you open your account, you do your transactions. Voting, for example, if you maybe you'd be able to vote for whom? Ian Royer on the panel this morning talks about 50,000 disabled people not being able to vote, I think. So imagine then that you have this ledger, the distributed ledger, again with all these details stored that people can verify themselves in some way and be able to vote, bringing that sort of inclusion in. In terms of, I think, looking at the Caribbean now, and BIT in particular, there is a challenge, and I think BIT is trying to address it. Again, coming back to the decentralization and inclusion, that the correspondent banking relationships have been threatened due to the stricter global regulations surrounding flows of money between and among countries. The Caribbean in particular has been hit by that. And I think what BIT is doing, using blockchain, again, to create a cryptocurrency for the Caribbean, if my understanding is right, can help to, again, strengthen the Caribbean as a whole and give us a bigger voice in the global system. It's been a challenge. Integration has been a challenge. Getting that common currency, I think it's stalled by now. Freedom of movement, for example, trade. You know, if you want to buy something from Jamaica, it goes through a bank. Your money has to go through a bank in the US and come back down. What about just moving money between the two countries, immediately setting up a cryptocurrency that has an exchange rate among the countries, but the countries accept this currency, which is backed by all the Caribbean governments. So I think in terms of inclusion and decentralization, these are some of the at least introductory comments I would make in that regard. Thank you for that. And finally, Glenn, what are your thoughts?
Great. Hi, everybody. My name is Glenn McKnight, and I'm a board member with ISOC, but I'm also on the ISOC SIG, which on blockchain, and the IEEE Internet Inclusion Program, which we have a blockchain think tank. When I think about blockchain, I think of it similar to how Dr. Christensen looked at different disruptive technologies. So you can imagine when CDs came in, it came in 72. It didn't disrupt the vinyl record industry right away. It took a little while, but when it actually came into place, bang, vinyl records were dead. And there's a bit of revival now from the purists. But disruptive technology is there, and what we're having in the situation right now, the mass, it's there. It's been here for a while. And I was part of the IEEE Humanitarian Technology Challenge, which we partnered with the UN Foundation and IEEE Foundation. And for those who don't know it, I better do a commercial for IEEE. That's why I have my IEEE tie on. It's 460,000 members around the world. It's seminal to the nuts and bolts of the internet. And if you're not a member of IEEE, you should be a member. So you have a situation where we looked 8 years ago at the Sustainable Development Goals of the UN, And these humanitarian challenges, including climate change and education and sexual balance and in terms of gender equity, and it was a lot of very important issues, and we couldn't do them all. So we decided to do 3. One was reliable electricity, which I gave you all a brochure. If you don't have it, make sure I give it to you. The Reliable Electricity Project, which we rolled out. The second one was on reliable data connections or connectivity. And the third was individual patient records. Now, that is where we are with blockchain. 8 years ago, when we talked about this, we had one little example of a guy doing stuff in Malawi and stuff in Congo. And because people in war-torn areas, their IDs are not with them. Everything's destroyed, right? So as they go to location and they got medical history, and how do you trace someone? And the blockchain was perfect. But at that time, we didn't realize that the blockchain would have done it. It would do it today. Unfortunately, there was an earthquake in Haiti, one of your neighbors, and the funds funneled to Haiti to do that recovery. But since then, we've rolled out, from a humanitarian point of view, the small-scale, small electrical grid solutions. And that is critical, because what Lynn was saying, 50% of the world's not connected. If you don't have power, you have nothing. You can't charge that cell phone, which costs you $1 a day, and maybe that's all you make in many countries. If you don't have power, you can't have that mesh network. And I did a community networking session in Kenya, and they were saying, 19 out of the 20 community networks weren't working. And I said, I bet you I know why. No power, right? So you have to have secure and cost-effective power. So we rolled out a program in Haiti on a trailer system that people actually own, and they exchange batteries, and they have basic power, enough for connectivity. And that is what's happening around the world in our power projects. We're using blockchain for that. There's many, many applications in land tenure. You know, one of the projects we're involved with is called Victory Garden. What about land tenure? Who owns that land? It's my land. No, it's my land. So you have disputes. So a land tenure system is extremely important. So how many applications for humanitarian purposes? It's endless. What it is, we have a technology that's looking for social application. It reminds me of the great philosopher Benny Hill. Benny Hill he said in the Times, capitalists with steak and kidney pudding, looking for a socialist with a knife and fork.
Right. Thank you for that. You mentioned power. I'm aware of a few blockchain-based projects that are tackling energy and power, and saying that maybe one day every single one of us can become a power station ourselves, right? So we've got a good wide variety of people with different backgrounds. We've been looking at blockchain from different angles, so we're getting a good input. I'm going to go into a bit of a controversial element of the blockchain. Nigel, you mentioned decentralizations and eliminating the middleman. So there's a conflict of words going on between the blockchain community and the banking, and I think anyone that's familiar with this industry will know Jamie Dimon. Banking is one of the applications that blockchain are trying to tackle with great intensity. They believe that the banking system hasn't evolved in centuries. When the first internet wave came along, they just adopted it and just became a lot more either economical or efficient. And now,
when the year 2000 Y2K issue, we couldn't stock those radios, and we brought them from South Africa. And when we rolled out before one laptop per child, the netbook, it was a hot item. Nobody has a netbook anymore. So I've been through this experience investing and involved with technology. Some of it's fads. I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball, but I'm hoping that there is a solution for those people who are basically a victim in the system because they need every penny that they earn.
Right. Okay, thanks. All right. The next one, I've been following this side of blockchain as well, and it's something that I find extremely interesting. So, we see, or we heard that in 2008, when the financial crisis happened, the world blamed the banks. Blockchain said, okay, look, I have the answer. Also around the world, if you generally look at what's going on, people are not happy with governments. Right? They're not happy with that. They appoint these people in. They have a vote once every 4 or 5 years. They put this person in, generally one person, and then that one person makes the decisions for the next 4 or 5 years. That governors. And they're not really an expert in anything, let alone any one of the subject matters that they're making decisions on. Do you think by decentralization we can decentralize governments, where we get to vote not just once, but every time there is an important decision to be made, we get to vote on our views on that decision, and then maybe if you couple that with artificial intelligence, maybe we can work out who are the best decision makers so that for any particular decision that needs to be made, it's a collective of 5, 6 people, but we choose the best people to make that decision. And if we go down that line, what happens to governments? Any volunteers for that one?
I think it's more the trust in the democratic process is broken down more than the trust in the governments themselves. But I am involved with somebody. I can't really give out his name. He's not in Trinidad, but the couple of guys, a couple in here who understand my almost obscene love for this country and anger about where the country is going, both from many different regards. There is actually a white paper that I am in discussion with the individual who has written it, and it's been used in countries like Estonia and so on, where the blockchain really has revolutionized and completely transformed government from the standpoint of not just with voting and information identity and so on, but delivery of public services, stamping out corruption, ensuring that as simple as the best possible deal is arrived at through procurement, right, for the countries. And what ends up happening is you have countries like Estonia now, and you may laugh, 3 times the size of us, but the government can actually operate from anywhere in the world. These almost archaic institutions and these archaic structures are beginning to change. So people talk about blockchain so many times with regards to financial services and delivery of technology, but with regards to Glenn, talking about the delivery of food in India, people don't think about those things, and certainly with government. And that white paper is called Future Gov. And I am in the gentleman's in Panama. He's an American in Panama. And we're actually going out to see him again in a couple of weeks' time. So in many regards, it can happen. But going back to the banking, getting a bank account in Trinidad now, and in many, you have to have 2 forms of ID, right, which most people don't have. They may have an ID card. They may not have a driver's license or a passport. You have to have a fixed place of abode. And I employ 1,200 people in Trinidad, and about 700 of them probably don't have a fixed place of abode. We all know about LP17, like this light pole and that kind of thing. So they will never be part of the financial system. They never will be. And the banks are saying, well, you know what? For various reasons, we can't give you a bank account. And just think of how many people are completely outside of the financial system. They can't save. They can't go, unless they have cash in their pocket. And think of the risks of cash in their pocket, right? And that financial inclusion is a huge deterrent to the progress of not just our society, but many societies like it. And these are areas that can be addressed from a public policy standpoint. And I think it's just a matter of being able to step out there and begin to embrace and just be open. And those say, well, Estonia did it, Mauritius, there are many countries that are doing it now, and they're really reaping the benefits from it. But from public policy, and certainly with regards to the banking, it's going to make a huge difference, because once you're not in the system, you're almost not even a citizen,
But I agree that there's huge potential for the use of the blockchain technology. And remember, the blockchain technology, distributed ledger, no one person has control, immutable, incorruptible, so that changing history is impossible, unless, of course, you have more than 50% of the guys agreeing, which could destroy the whole damn thing. But there are opportunities for the use of the blockchain technology in governance. I would caution that you don't want to be voting on everything, because then there'll be chaos. But definitely there are opportunities for the use of the blockchain technology in governance.
Glenn?
Yeah, since you mentioned Estonia, it's a fantastic example of basically the Prime Minister was a cyber junkie. Very progressive country. Remember, they came out of the shadows of Soviet domination. All prescriptions are on the blockchain. So do they have an opiate addiction problem? No. Which country does? America, which are not on the blockchain for their opiate prescriptions, because the person will go to one pharmacist to another pharmacist, and the overdose rate is incredibly high in the US. And again, that's an example of imposing regulations that actually is a benefit to the community. We have a history of representative democracy, not participatory democracy. We give up our control. We vote somebody in once every 4 years. We entrust them with responsibility. But this generation wants more participation. They're more used to having their voices heard. And I think it's this generation, the younger generation, that's going to make the difference. I think we're going to see change, but I think people who are used to casting a ballot once every 4 years, it's got to change, because it's not benefiting except those that are in power. And so one has to start looking at progressive ways to tapping into the mind zeitgeist of the public.
Right, okay. Randall, I want to change the question for you, just because I want to get through this question, and then we're going to open up for questions to the floor. In the accountancy world, or part of the financial sector and corporate valuations and everything, everybody knows that when WhatsApp was purchased a few years back, they paid $19 billion for it at that time. And it hadn't made any profit. I don't think it was even actually earning revenue. And the reason why so much was paid for it, because they evaluated it on network value. It had, I don't know how many billion people on the network. So an argument has been surfacing for a while, and is very prominent in the blockchain world, is to say that, okay, look, when I join a network or a community, I'm adding value to it, called the network effect. And the value of this corporation or institution, whether it's Facebook, WhatsApp, Instagram, Snapchat, increases. But me as the participant that is giving it the content and creating that value is not benefiting. Hence, come back to the blockchain advocates who are saying, okay, look, we are going to have DAOs or DACs, decentralized autonomous organizations or corporations. And where, when we talk about inefficiencies, they're actually looking at shareholder value as being an efficiency, and saying that, okay, look, we in the new world will be part of different communities, and we're part of that community. We will add value by our participation, and we will extract value out of that. And hence goes back to what Nigel has said, that we're moving into the internet of value. So do you see a mass-scale adoption or transformation in the organizational world where we end up with decentralized organizations?
So I think, okay, so I mean, in looking at, I mean, there are 1,400 cryptocurrencies currently existing. One of those, which I saw, is trying to build a model like that, where various startups can come onto that blockchain and use the cryptocurrency to build out their business, autonomous organizations. Vitalik Buterin, I think that the founder of Ethereum,
yeah.
he made a comment that, in the Western world, there's trust in governments, institutions, Facebook, Google, whatever. In most of the world, that trust doesn't exist. And that is where his opinion was that is where the opportunity is going to come from. That people don't trust their banks in some parts of the world. They don't trust their government. Blockchain has the potential to create that trust. Whether we will see organizations becoming autonomous, I think one of the key factors, and I think that what we were actually locked horns on, Ash, was the issue of trust. I think Bitcoin, for example, it grew. So you have the technological trust, the trust in the technology. It's immutable, it's encrypted. But then you have the social trust. What made Bitcoin so popular? It's just a group of people came together. It's not backed by anything, at least that I know of. But they trusted in the system, that here's what we can value this and we will use it. I think for autonomous organizations, for the ecosystem then to be built out, societies will, or maybe moving to a higher level of maturity where they can trust each other, and therefore they can operate autonomously, whether it be an autonomous cryptocurrency outside of the system or an organization. I think that trust. So, I mean, if I were to give an example, democracy, the shift from centralized control, autocracy and monarchies to democracy required a maturing of society where they could trust that here's what, if we vote for this government or this party or whoever it is, that things will be stable, we can trust them to represent us, etc. That top-down was then evolved into a decentralized then sort of governance. I think it's the same thing with blockchain. That societies have matured to a point where now we see that push, that drive, that hunger for decentralization. So yes, it is possible. I mean, I don't know that I can say yes for sure. I think we still need to see how it turns out.
Okay. And Glenn, same question to you. And I just want to add on that by decentralization and the participants extracting value, does that also lend itself into redistribution of wealth?
Yeah, the reality is that people who have power, the 1%, those that live in the buildings right over here, I was told.
We don't live there.
That's Nuran and Lisa told me that joke. I can't be responsible for it. Yeah, they're not going to give up power very easily. In theory, we've seen many examples where we've had historically mass uprisings of people power, whether union movement in the UK prior to the First World War and other locations. There's an action and a reaction. We've seen it recently in the US with the election in the US. It's going to take a long time still before this happens. Now, the reality is the more money people have in their pockets, the more money they're spending in raising people up by giving them a hand up, not a handout, by allowing them to have more disposable income. It's going to reduce a lot of the inequalities, and it's going to be better for everybody because at the end of the day, the results will actually pay off in dividends. The question is convincing the power to be that this is to their best interest. There's going to be a rearguard reaction for sure. But in the end, I think blockchain can play an effective role in it.
Actually, if I could just 30 seconds on that topic, because I know the 1% thing has been interesting for Trinidad in the last 6 months, but I think it's more insiders and outsiders. And I think what's happened now is the insiders operate within this network of privilege and power and access. And it's going to be very difficult for them to decouple, because that really is how they continue to perpetuate themselves. What's happening now is it's not really the 1%, not just in Trinidad, in the world, there are now people of substance, wealth, and girth within the insiders now. And what's happening is you're starting to see that whole coterie of players begin to get fractured. And I think that's where the opportunity is. It's not really in just really the 1%, because, you know, I mean, Bill Gates is a gazillionaire, and we still look at him with merit. So wealth is not an issue, right? Wealth really is not an issue. It's not viewed that way. But that network of power and privilege and access, which has essentially run the show for the last however many years, that is what is being threatened now. And there are people who are in the 1% who are no longer, before, when you were in the 1% of wealth, you were naturally an insider. But now, there are these, you know, as you know, there was a cartoon not too long ago of, there was a show, let's say a show, a conference, and it said, the guys in suits are trying to get jobs from the guys in hoodies, right? Because the guys in the little hoodies, you know, he was a billionaire, right? Whether from crypto or whatever the case may have been. And that's where the shift is. I think when that happens, you can begin to see that decentralization of power and access, and then you can become a society of merit, where decisions are made not necessarily from the top down, but decisions are made unilaterally. I think when that time comes, and that time is fast approaching, and that's why the diamonds, because the same Jamie Dimon said 3 years ago, guys, he had a meeting of his top people and said, Bitcoin is going to eat our lunch. He said that those were his words 3 years ago. So they recognized, and then they've continuously tried to undermine it, and now they're realizing we've thrown everything at cryptocurrency, and it's here to say, and such is the power of people.
Yeah.
Right.
Nigel?
Sorry to add on to that.
Yeah, well, I think a different tack on that, because with the Internet of Information, and I read just recently, it was a guy writing in the New York Times this weekend. He said there was Internet 1, which dealt with all the protocols, which are open source and very free. And then you had the Googles and the Facebooks and the Amazons of the world taking all that information and becoming hugely rich on it. And the people supplying that information got nothing. So one of the things that the blockchain is looking at is, and it comes back to the whole identity thing, that this is my identity, and I own my identity, and if you want to use my identity and my data, you should pay for it. So it will be interesting to see how that develops. I find that hugely interesting.
Okay, I mean, that's a very interesting comment. So what we're talking about there is getting into big data. So what the group funds, Facebook, Apple, Netflix, and Google, they have so much information on us, they can mine that data, manipulate us, but they can always have an edge over anybody else. And it's a recognized issue in blockchain, and identity, big data encryption, to be able to monetize our own data is another aspect that blockchain is trying to deal with. I do have more questions, but I'm going to actually open it up to the floor to see what questions we have from the floor. Nigel?
Yes, Nigel Castamere, CTU again. Estonia was mentioned. Just to clarify, the population of Estonia is 1.3 million, which might sound familiar to many of the people in this room. And the CTU recently has been liaising with Estonia to help us in spurring the advancement of e-government around the Caribbean. So we could possibly have access to some of their expertise. My question, though, relates to an article I read recently about Bitcoin and Bitcoin mining. And it raised the question as to whether it was sustainable based on the amount of energy that it used. And well, from experience from the experience of the panelists, is this seen as a big problem for the future, or is it just something that'll be solved by technological advances? And how is that Is that a concern or a consideration for any of the business developments taking place?
And I can take a stab at it, but anybody else?
Well, it's interesting because it is recognized as a problem, and in fact, Ethereum in its developmental, the work it's doing is looking at moving from proof of work, which is all that mining, to proof of stake, where basically you invest money and you bet on the outcome, and if the outcome meets the criteria, you're rewarded, as opposed to spending all this money to find the right answer, and whoever finds the answer wins. So it's early stages, and the next phase of Ethereum is supposed to start the transition from proof of work to proof of stake, but they recognize it as a problem.
Right. So again, just to back you up, it's a problem. Most of the industry recognizes it as a problem, and it's not sustainable. But proof of works was the first consensus algorithm that was put in place. The whole space is an experiment. A lot of the technologies that are in there will become the problems of tomorrow, and we will have to find solutions. Proof of works, people have been experimenting with proof of stakes. There's different variants of proof of stakes, from pure to delegated proof of stake. There's proof of importance. There's other chains, for the ones that are familiar in the space, like IOTA, that are using no blockchain, and they're going with the technology, something called a DAG, or other people know it as hash graph. So I think a lot of the technologies...
What was that?
Hash graph.
Hash graph, okay.
Yeah, not ash graph. It's an experiment. I think you're going to see the technologies come and go and get replaced as we mature. But the main thing is decentralized ledger technology and how that can affect us. Can we have a...
So let me add. In addition to that issue, the amount of energy being used is an issue, and storage is an issue. So these are two issues that are, you can't ignore them. They're issues that have to come up with solutions.
Yeah. Can we have a mic?
Look, you can go to the mic.
To Mr. Taylor?
There's a roving or...
Sure. George?
Thank you very much. I think the panel did a very good job. I think we had very interesting discussions. I wanted to hear the views of the panel on two issues. One, in terms of what do you see as the role of the central banks in this?
Wow.
I'm sure I would like to hear Nigel talk about that.
That's a good one.
And then the implications for the tax regimes. Will countries be worried that they'll be losing a lot of tax revenue if blockchain becomes, operational fully? Thank you.
Central bank. Reserve banking. Fractional reserve banking. I suppose central banks will be disintermediated. It depends on the various types and how you come up with the currency. But if you're going to use the blockchain, and if you want your currency to really represent a reliable store of value, then you remove the power from the central bankers and put it in the software, in the code. It would be interesting to see how they give up their power. But definitely, I think there are opportunities because if we focus on Bitcoin, its power is that everybody knows that there will be 21 million Bitcoin. Right? And then after that, you will then trade it. You cannot say the same thing for the US dollar. You cannot say the same thing for the TT dollar. You definitely cannot say the same thing today for the Venezuelan Bolivar. So they're subject to the whims and fancies of politicians and bureaucrats, which is not the same with Bitcoin or any properly designed cryptocurrency. On taxes, taxes income and profits. So to the extent that you make income and profit, you should pay your tax. So that would be up to the taxman to enforce.
I just wanted to...
There's one guy right here.
I just want to comment just quickly on the central bank. I was at the CTU's conference in April, FinTech, and one of the presenters, they made the point that, the UK central bank and some of the other central banks are setting up regulatory sandboxes so that the startups can experiment, they can know what regulations they need to enact, and then push that legislation with central governments. So yes, I think there's a role. I think in the Caribbean, I think at least there's a lot of work to be done. We need to take more risk, in my opinion, and not be followers in the space. Yeah.
Central banks need to follow their mandate. Central banks are to manage monetary policy. Central banks have gotten, not just more so outside of Trinidad, gotten way outside of their remit of what their authorities are. And we've all sat idly by and watched it, and now we are paying now for those sins. The printing of money and the issuance of money, and the central banks have, central banks need to simply go back to what their remit is as a central bank. And once that happens, I think, if it does happen, that is, things will regulate themselves quite quickly. The tax part, I really, there are ways to make money from it. But.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jarian Paul. I'm an entrepreneur. Right? So for a long time, I've been an entrepreneur, and I've always been sort of trying to figure out how things work in this world. I'm very young, right? So as I got older, I got to realize the banking system, et cetera, et cetera. I'm happy we had the talk this morning about the financial services as well, because that ties in. I've been following payment gateways and opening up entrepreneurship in Trinidad and Tobago since I was 16 years old, so that's 5 years ago. So when I found out about Bitcoin, something clicked for me. And it was that this will change everything, right? So now I have a question as it relates to entrepreneurship in this increasingly changing world. So how do you see blockchain and the Bitcoin protocol? I'm happy that you made the distinction between blockchain and the Bitcoin protocol, affecting entrepreneurship, the governance of companies, and profit-taking in an increasingly decentralized world.
Right, I can take a quick stab at that. So in terms of entrepreneurship, we mentioned the ICOs. There's a phenomenal amount of funds being raised through ICOs in the blockchain world. Now, that is not necessarily a good thing at the moment. That's also an issue, how easy it is to raise funds. So the blockchain community recognizes that issue, and there are discussions going on to see, okay, look, for the long-term viability, how can we deal with that? So going forward, I think it will be easier to raise capital under the blockchain environment. In terms of governance, they're also recognizing that issue, that the investors should have more control. And using smart contracts, there's already things in place where the smart contract will control the rate at which it will give the funds to the entrepreneur. So you have to deliver or hit certain milestones before the investment or the funds are being released to you. But again, in the blockchain world, it's an issue that is being recognized. So you need to raise the funds, but then the investors want to control how those funds are being used. So they'll work out. There's a lot of discussions and thoughts going into that. I don't know what your thoughts are.
Just briefly, let's not be fooled that, with all of the ICO hullabaloo that's going on throughout the world, this is also a transfer of wealth. It's a transfer. People think that, these ICOs are just raising money, just like people going into under their mattress or getting money. People are taking money out of traditional legacy investment portfolios and putting them into ICOs. And that's also one of the reasons why there's this alleged regulatory crackdown, because the insiders are saying, hang on a sec, the market cap of these cryptocurrencies via these ICOs is now 750 billion. Well, in the last couple of days, it may have gone down 10, 12%, right? It's almost $1 trillion. So that's money that was under our management. It's now going into these ICOs. We can't allow that to happen. So it is also a transfer of wealth, not just new money coming out of thin air. But what you're going to experience is you're going to experience a lot more ease in doing business, a lot more speed in doing business, your less excessive costs in doing business, and you're not going to have some of the, I mean, I'm assuming with an adoption in a place where it's been adopted, a lot less red tape and bureaucracy in getting your business set up, and significantly less costs.
Aside from the question of funding, what I'm really asking is, a business currently exists to take profit, right, and as well as provide some good or service, right? In an increasingly decentralized world, so we have Uber right now, we have Airbnb, for example. These companies are in the middle of the transaction. They take a profit, they are the business. What I'm saying is, as we produce more protocols and we produce things to decentralize more and more of life as we know it, then what is the role of the entrepreneur in this new world, is what I'm asking. How much profit does that entrepreneur take? And is it even right to then take profit? And if so, how much?
Well, I don't think you can answer that question. That it depends on your interaction with the market. What is going to happen is that you're going to have a lot more opportunity to reach much bigger markets, depending on what our problem you're solving for. So as an entrepreneur, if you are a blockchain software engineer, you are in great supply. Everybody anywhere in the world is going to be looking for you. And it doesn't matter where you are. All right? And getting paid and making payments is going to be a lot easier. What banks do, banks move money, we invest money, and we give advice, and we make spreads in the middle. That's going to become more difficult because the ability of people to interact with each other directly, knowing that it is safe to do so, is going to make commerce much faster and much easier. And as Peter said, you're going to be spending less on the middleman and focus more on solving the problems that is whatever your value proposition is. So there is no guideline as to how much profits. You may be able to make a lot of money or very little, because hopefully the competition is also going to get a lot tougher.
You use Uber?
No, I haven't used this yet.
You never use?
Never.
So people call me an enigma because, I mean, almost virtually 90% of my investment money is in digital currencies. Mm-hmm. Yet I refuse to use Uber, and I refuse to use Airbnb for those very same reasons. Because what ends up happening is they're just rentiers. At the end of the day, they provide a certain level of what's the right word? Not efficiency, but
ease.
But they do nothing. What they really do is they're
an
agent. They're an agent.
Put you in contact with transport.
Right, and they take a fee for it.
And they take a small fee, but it's cheaper for me.
I still hail my taxi cabs when I go to London.
I don't.
Very happy.
Glenn, you wanted to
I think you need to, rather than just call yourself an entrepreneur, what is your business sector?
Exactly.
And you mentioned Uber or Lyft or Airbnb and all that shared economy. You see an opportunity. Can blockchain fit within? It can be a financial modality in order to facilitate transactions. For example, my daughter, in 1 year, they launched and rolled out a mid-century furniture company. And I said to them, you know, there's lots of people with Bitcoin and they want to buy stuff. So they've rolled out their business to actually access the US market for people to purchase their product in Bitcoin. It's very lucrative. So you have to think about what is your business rather than thinking of yourself as a Bitcoin entrepreneur or a blockchain entrepreneur. What is that business sector that you're in? Exactly. And how can you use blockchain and Bitcoin as a tool?
Exactly.
Right. Question over there?
Yeah. Good afternoon. His question actually, and some of the responses leads directly into my question. My name is Emerson John Charles. I have my master's in marketing. I was not aware of many of the revolutionary uses of blockchain outside of the financial sector that were mentioned today. Mentioned in India, in Estonia, in America. But the background of the blockchain technology is coding. And these places have thriving ecosystems, and they have a mass of persons with those skill sets in their country and in their region. In Estonia, they even ensure that they teach coding in school. What input do you all get from the regional governments in terms of preparing our masses to solve our problems that could eventually change the Caribbean, change the world, and ensure that we financially benefit from it instead of being just bystanders?
If I get you correctly, I did a presentation at the UN on capacity building and IT certification. The educational system is history. It's not really teaching for the future. I got a great article, and I shared it on the TC Mag Facebook on an article from IEEE Spectrum, the need for blockchain developers. What school in Trinidad, and mind you, anywhere in the world, are they really creating these leading edge people? I see lots of very expensive workshops for a weekend, $5,000, but they're targeted at the banks. You know, I see some boot camps that are happening, but real solid training. I think you guys have an opportunity, and you got to knock on your Minister of Education and say, hey, here's a program that they're doing someplace. Maybe bug people like IEEE to do online courses or ISOC, but you really have to get the education people to look at their training programs, because the IT certification, and I believe probably many of you in the room took it, a lot of those applications aren't used anymore.
Nope.
You know, a lot of people are coming through. They're doing, you know, I'm doing a course on apps. Yeah, 99% of apps don't make any money. You know, it's not going to be. You're not going to get the killer app. But blockchain developers, there's job opportunities here and elsewhere.
Huge. So to answer your question, I am not going to ask any government anything. Waste of time. Do it yourself.
Anybody
Okay.
have
No, go and do it yourself, because if you wait on government, the boat will have sailed. They of course, Block Geeks has courses online. Not very expensive. I mean, and I think you have some guys here doing some other stuff. You mentioned it earlier.
Yeah. We have a question from online? Okay, yep.
So,
Wait for government, it's got nothing done.
Hassan Voya says, I read in a Guardian article, BIT plans to use the blockchain to pursue the monetary union for the Caribbean community. Can you expand on this?
Yeah. Yeah. A single currency for the Caribbean, right? We are, in the Caribbean, one of the most underbanked regions in the world. Again, going back to the same reasons I spoke to about before. Most of our citizens don't have 2 forms of ID, they don't have a fixed place of abode, they can't get a certificate of character, all of these barriers to getting a bank account. Pursuant to that, to get money from here to, you know, Jamaica, Antigua, to go to the US, go through, I mean, there's just excessive costs and so on. Our intention is a single market currency between the participating Caribbean states that will facilitate cross-border payments, utilizing the blockchain. So all of the transparency, efficiency, and immutability of it. The issue with, or I shouldn't say the issue, the thing with BIT is that we have maintained, because it's very easy to consider this industry as maverick, and could we have been at market already, like a couple of people have done both in Trinidad and outside of Trinidad? Sure, we could have, but we have spent inordinate amounts of time between regulators, we actually have Pricewaterhouse has signed off on our KYC and AML policies, which is I mean, there was no small feat to have one of the big 4. So it has taken some time for us to get over all of the regulatory hurdles. As the old adage in Trinidad and throughout the world is, it's better to ask for forgiveness and permission. But we have continued to ask for permission. We also have an investor in BIT that's a US traded company. So from that standpoint, we have not been delayed, but we have taken a lot more time to make sure when we do launch, which is going to be rather soon, all of those regulatory hurdles would have been overcome. But we are going to be using the blockchain. It's going to be the first of its kind, and we are also going to be, through that, be the first, and many countries are trying it now on our lead, to issue digital fiat, which is essentially, the Bitcoin killer, right? What it is a central bank saying, we are not going to issue money digitally. We're no longer going to issue paper currency and then transact via, whether it's smartphones or transact digitally, so that for peer-to-peer transactions, there'll be no need to go through a bank. So when that happens, we call it our man walks on moon moment, because we're soon going to have a central bank digital settlement, which will be the first of its kind in the world, and certainly for the Caribbean region, it'll do a lot for us. So that is going to happen pretty soon.
Right, thank you. We have another question?
Hi, yeah. Right. Hi, my name is Rishi Maraj. I'm from Disclosure Today. We're a civil society, social governance NGO. And the whole question of blockchain from a governance point of view, with regards to change and dealing with that culture of change. I remember being to a meeting about a year and a half ago with the IDB, in which they're funding a project in the registry, our land registry, to be able to digitize the whole thing. And it's one of the most frustrating projects that the IDP representatives spoke about, because there's that resistance to change. Obviously, we know why, because it's going to impact on the corruption. And then I remember a couple of years back working with TT BizLink when I worked in government, and dealing with the whole idea of a one-stop shop for you to be able to register for customs if you're coming to import goods and stuff like that, to make the ease of business quicker. And again, customs, being very reluctant to be able to go aboard. And the whole idea of blockchain technology, we saw Estonia, I think there's a country, I think it's Qatar, into their passports, and they're now using blockchain technologies from a passport point of view. How do we come about and get over that hurdle of resistance to change, not only from the politicians, but I think also from underneath the politicians, the public servants, the public officers, in terms of not wanting to embrace this whole idea of technology, because it's going to impact on their, what we call supplemental income on the side.
Maybe if there was a pill that you could take and then you become blockchain, operate that way. I mean, that's received. It's a very, guys can, I'll speak very briefly. It's an ethos. I mean, it really is. Certainly in countries like ours, the inefficiency perpetuates the corruption, and the corruption perpetuates the inefficiency, because who wants licensing office fixed? I mean, that could fix in 72 hours. So it really is it's an ethos and a culture. How do we get the authorities to make that change? Well, it's two things. One, you go on a platform and you shout it out loud. Or two, you become the authority. So the question is, when are we prepared to say, you know what, the time has come for a people-based, not a politician-based, a people-based government that can understand these things. And, remember, a government's job is about changing society, not winning an election. The goal is not to win an election. And once countries like ours are straddled with that mindset, it'll be very, very difficult to overcome and get to the area that you want to get to. But the power is within us to make that happen. The blockchain can't make that happen. We have to make it happen.
I just want to make one comment. Years ago, I worked on a number of public sector transformation projects. I think my experience is that the government in Trinidad and Tobago, our goals need to be cut down into smaller bite-sized projects and not these massive projects to increase the chances of success. I think in terms of that issue and some of other issues in terms of change, it really needs to be cut down in smaller bite-sized pieces.
Yeah, I said earlier on about the earthquake in Haiti. One of the most interesting things is the Canadian government was the second largest donor. They didn't give it to the government of Haiti, nor not-for-profit or civil society in Haiti. They gave it to Canadian not-for-profits because they didn't feel the level of trust that these people wouldn't take off with the money. so which is an issue. So what I would think that we need to work on the US aid, CEDA, SIDA, DFAID, like all these international development agencies, and get it in their RFP process. Get them thinking about that's a deliverable. You know, put that in the, because many of these projects are funded by international aid. If we can get it and educate them and have these tools, these methodologies in their RFP, when people bid on it, whether it's an outside contractor or inside contractor, that they follow these guidelines, because it's all about accountability. Remember, a lot of these countries on Transparency International, they don't do so well, right? So this is one way for them to be compliant. It is going to take time. One of the things I posted on the Twitter account earlier today was the call from UNICEF on blockchain solutions. And UNICEF does a lot of international work. I think it's going to happen. I think you're just ahead of your time. You know, be patient. You know, I think land tenure is serious issues. And, you know, remember, we have to feed a lot more people and we have to be more intensive. And the way to do that is we have to have clear land title.
And I'll just add to that. It's a question that I often think about. And I see some countries that are very forward-thinking and are embracing it. And then I do feel that the Caribbean, not only with this technology, but a lot of technologies, they take a very pessimistic or a very resistive view on it. Now, what I do like about blockchain is you can't stop it, right? So you got to make two choices. You either jump in now, and you're part of the community, right? About 4 or 5 months ago, China banned exchanges, and there was this rumor that, okay, centralized exchanges are going to be banned. Whatever the reasons were why they were going to ban it or not, it caused the blockchain community to get together and say, right, we're going to have decentralized exchanges. And they took off, and there's loads of them. You can't stop them. Recently, Korea was also talking about maybe shutting down some exchanges, but they haven't, right? I don't know whether it's because of the decentralized exchanges or not. So I think the ecosystem will evolve, and it's just going to get stronger in terms of decentralization, and then it'll just fall in place. Robert, you had a question?
Hi, everyone. I'm Robert Martinez, a director on HTT Mag. So I had a kind of big picture question. I think hopefully follows on pretty well from the last question. So what I was thinking is, let's assume the future that we're interested in and then work backwards from there. So let's assume that blockchain technology is taken up in a widespread manner. People use in all kinds of areas, land registries, but also cryptocurrencies for transactions, all kinds of different things. What are the top 3 things that need to happen and who needs to do them? Assuming we're not like on an inevitable course towards that already.
I need to understand the question a bit more clearly. Top 3 things.
Sure. I mean, okay, so we're in the situation right now where there's a lot of interest in the space, but it's still sort of, you know, it's in the news, that kind of thing. But the average person is not really using the technology. But it has the potential to revolutionize all the different areas that have been spoken about in the panel today. What are sort of like the big movements? So, for example, what BIT is doing with digital fiat is going to the regulators, going to the central banks and getting buy-in and trust in the system and working to make that a future that we can where everybody is really involved. So what are some, say top 3, but you don't need to do that, but what are some of the things that need to happen and who needs to do it?
Increase adoption.
Yeah, to increase adoption.
So opinion-wise, So you mean, so in mine and Randall's, everyone's opinion? Right, okay. All right, well, I think certainly what we're doing, which what I was attracted to, is I think the most important thing is financial inclusion. Without financial inclusion, people are outside of the financial system. They almost don't exist, right? They don't exist. And they're not even recognized. So I think financial inclusion is a huge part of allowing the society to develop it the way, I know it sounds very altruistic, but to develop the way that it needs to develop, and it gives people a certain sense of dignity, a certain sense of belonging. Because when you can now, whether it's with your mobile phone, whether it's with a credit card, when you can go now and go into a shop, look at an item, and then you can then say, hey, You know, you become part of that system, and you can begin to save money. I think the other area, the other main area is going to be in, I think, based on the amount of fraud that, I don't really have three, is identity protection. Because I think what's happening now, I think, and I just mean identity protection with regards to credit card fraud and stuff I'm talking about with regards to child and human trafficking and all of those things, which, I mean, we talk about those things as some kind of a headline in a newspaper, but when you think of the subcontinent and those areas, what's happening with human trafficking it's abominable. And there's another group, I mean, I'm fortunate because of my involvement with BIT and being in this space for 3 or 4 years, to have met some really interesting people. Some guys that are just so bright, it's almost bizarre. And there's a company that's dealing specifically with that right now. And the beauty of the blockchain is that there's so many applications. And all these, I think, was it Glenn or Randall said there were 1,400 coins, right? And each of those different cryptocurrencies and I know Glenn touched on it. There's actually an ICO that's being launched very soon. And I just say an ICO because it needs to be funded. It's called Academy, and you can actually look at it online. Academy, go to academytoken.com. And what it is the first of its kind in the world of a blockchain school. I know the guy well. His name is Jason King. They just pitched in Australia, and funnily enough, there's a university in